remember the old house like it was yesterday, the creaky wooden floors, the worn-out rug in the living room, and the smell of my mother's cooking wafting through the air. I loved that house. It was supposed to be a place of warmth, safety, and comfort. But for me, it felt more like a prison. The moments when we'd all gather around the table for family dinners were always bittersweet. On the outside, it seemed like a perfect family. But beneath the surface, something dark was brewing. Growing up with my twin brother, Ethan, was like living in the shadow of someone much brighter. It wasn't that I wasn't loved, it was just that I wasn't his favorite. Ethan was always the golden child, the one with the perfect grades, the charm, and the easy smile. Me? I was the invisible one. The one who couldn't get it right no matter how hard I tried. Little did I know, the seeds of resentment were being planted by someone I trusted most. It was the day I got kicked out that changed everything. The day my family believed the lies Ethan had spread about me, and I had no idea how my life would never be the same again. What followed was a journey I never saw coming, a journey of revenge. At first it seemed small, just a few whispers, a couple of looks exchanged between my parents that I could not quite understand. But over time, those whispers grew louder, and the glances became sharper, like daggers aimed at my heart. It did not take long before I began to realize that no matter what I did, I could never escape the shadow of my twin brother, Ethan. Ethan was everything my parents wanted. He was the charming, outgoing one who never had to struggle. He was the perfect student, the one with all the friends, the one who was always praised. And then there was me, the one who could not measure up. No matter how hard I tried, nothing I did was ever good enough. If I brought home a good grade, my parents barely acknowledged it. But if Ethan did, it was like the whole world stopped. Look at Ethan. He is going to be something great one day. He is going to be the one who makes us proud. They would say, as if I was not even standing there. It did not take long for my brother to start taking advantage of this. He knew what I did not. He knew that my parents would believe anything he said about me. I was the outcast, the one who could never do anything right. Ethan played this to his advantage, of course. He was not malicious in the beginning, at least, not outwardly. But the more he saw how easily my parents believed his every word, the more he started to manipulate them, and me, for his own benefit. I remember one afternoon when I was just 14. We had a family game night. I was excited for it, hoping maybe this time things would be different, that maybe this time we would all laugh together, and it would feel like a real family. But it did not go that way. Not at all. I had been talking with my friends about a game I wanted to get, and when I mentioned it to my parents, they dismissed it. You do not need that. Maybe when you are a little more responsible like your brother, we can talk about it, my mother had said, her voice cold, almost harsh. Ethan was sitting there smirking, as usual. He did not need to say a word for my parents to understand. He had his way of playing the perfect son, never too much, but just enough to make me feel invisible. And that was when things started to escalate. It was Ethan who started planting seeds of doubt about me. At first, it was small things. A few offhand comments here and there about my messy room or how I spent too much time with my friends instead of focusing on school. You should be more like Ethan, they would say. He has his head on straight. I tried to brush it off, but it was impossible. The whispers behind my back grew louder. My parents started accusing me of not trying hard enough, of being lazy and irresponsible. But it was Ethan who would play the victim. He would subtly tell my parents that I had been difficult with him, that I was causing trouble at school, that I was the one who made everything worse. It did not stop there. It got worse as we entered high school. Ethan began to tell outrageous lies, manipulating situations to his advantage. If I ever had a minor disagreement with him, he would twist it into something much bigger. He would tell my parents that I had called him names or pushed him around, things I had never even considered doing. And my parents? They believed him every time. I could tell by the way they looked at me, like I was the bad one, the one who was always causing trouble. Then, the rumors started. It was a small thing at first, a whispered comment from one of Ethan's friends. But soon, it became an entire story. Ethan started telling people that I was violent, that I had hurt him at home. He fabricated injuries to make it seem like I had actually done it. He would punch himself in the arm or hit himself in the face. And then the next day, he would walk into school with a black eye or a bruise, saying that I had done it. At first, I did not understand what was happening. But soon enough, people started to avoid me. My friends, the ones I thought would always stand by me, began to distance themselves. They started to believe the rumors. It was like I had been erased from their lives, and no one was willing to question what they had heard. I remember the first time a teacher looked at me differently. I was sitting in class, trying to focus, but I could feel her eyes on me. It was not the usual kind look she would give me when she checked in on my progress. It was more like she was watching me for signs of something dark. That was when I realized how deep Ethan's lies had gone. It was not just my friends anymore. It was everyone. He had manipulated the entire school into believing that I was this horrible person, the kind of person who hurt her own brother. The whispers followed me everywhere. It did not matter where I went, whether it was the cafeteria, the hallways, or even the bus ride home. The looks, the side glances, the hushed voices, it was all there, and it was all aimed at me. I could not escape it. But the worst part, the part that hurt the most, my parents did not believe me. They did not even ask me if the rumors were true. They did not care to listen to my side of the story. They just accepted whatever Ethan told them. One day, when I could not take it anymore, I confronted my brother. I asked him why he was doing this to me, but he just smirked at me, as if he had already won. "Because no one will ever believe you," he said. "You are just the problem child. I am the one who is perfect." That was the moment I realized that I could not rely on anyone anymore. Not my friends, not my family, and certainly not Ethan. I was alone in this, and no one would stand up for me. The days blurred together after that, each one feeling like the last, just an endless cycle of pain and frustration. The more I tried to move forward, the more my past dragged me back. I had always hoped for a way out, a way to escape the lies and the hurt, but the deeper I looked into my family's eyes, the clearer it became that there would be no escape, without taking a stand. It was the day that my life, as I knew it, shattered. It began like any other. I woke up early, made myself some breakfast, and sat down to read for a while before heading off to school. But something was different that morning. There was an unusual tension in the house, an energy that made my skin crawl. I could feel it in the air, thick with anticipation, though I did not know why. I finished my breakfast and went to gather my things, just like any other day, when my mother called me from the kitchen. "Can you come here for a moment?" Her voice had a strange tone to it, one that sounded like a mix of concern and disappointment. I hesitated for a moment, wondering what she wanted, but I had no idea that my entire world was about to come crashing down. I walked into the kitchen, and both my parents were standing there. My father was staring at me with an intensity I had never seen before, his face lined with frustration. "Sit down," he ordered, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was no warmth in his voice, only cold authority. I sat, my heart pounding in my chest. Something was wrong. I could sense it in every fiber of my being, but I did not know what. "We need to talk," my father began, his voice hard and unforgiving. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "About what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. About you and your brother," my mother interjected, her voice trembling. She had always been the softer of the two, but today she was unrecognizable. "We have heard some things, and it is time you finally told the truth." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my stomach twist in knots, the blood draining from my face as I tried to make sense of her words. "What things?" I asked, though I already had a feeling I knew where this was going. My father's eyes narrowed. "Ethan has been telling us a very different story, and it is time for you to stop lying and take responsibility. We know what you have been doing, and we are not going to tolerate it any longer." Ethan. The name alone made my blood boil. Could not believe what I was hearing. I had been living through his lies for months now, and still, my parents were choosing to believe him. "What has Ethan told you?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "He has told us that you have been abusing him, that you have been violent, and that you have been making his life miserable at home," my mother said, her words hitting me like shards of glass. My mind was racing. This was impossible. I had never laid a hand on Ethan, never hurt him in any way, and yet my parents were standing there, listening to him, believing his lies over the truth. "How could you believe that?" I cried, my voice cracking. "Ethan is lying. I have never hurt him. This is not true." But my father just shook his head, his expression unwavering. "Enough. We are done listening to your excuses. Ethan is our son, and he has never lied. To us. You, on the other hand, have never shown us the respect we deserve. You have been nothing but trouble, and we are tired of it." I could feel my world slipping away. My entire life, my entire existence had been reduced to a series of lies. Ethan had successfully turned my parents against me, and now I had nowhere to go. "Please, you have to believe me," I pleaded, my voice barely audible. "You do not understand. Ethan is the one who has been hurting me all along. He is the one who has been spreading these lies about me. You cannot just take his word over mine." But it was too late. My father's face was cold, his resolve firm. "We have made our decision. You need to leave. Now." The words felt like a slap to my face. I was being kicked out. Again. I had already been rejected by my friends, by the people I had trusted. And now, I was being abandoned by my own parents. The people who were supposed to protect me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I wanted to scream, to shout, to beg them to listen. But I knew it would do no good. They had already made up their minds, and there was nothing I could do to change it. "Please," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "Where am I supposed to go? What do you expect me to do?" My mother's face softened for a brief moment, but it quickly hardened, again. "We do not know, but you can no longer stay here." I stood there, frozen, my mind racing, my heart breaking. For years, I had hoped that my parents would come to their senses, that they would see the truth. But now, I understood. They would never see me for who I truly was. I was nothing more than a scapegoat for Ethan's lies. And no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, it would never change. As I packed my things, I felt like I was suffocating. My heart was in my throat, my chest tight with the weight of it all. I was leaving the only home I had ever known, and I had no idea where I would go next. When I walked out of the house, I felt like a part of me had died. I was no longer part of that family. I had been cast aside, thrown out like an unwanted piece of trash. But what happened next changed everything. The day I left my family's house, I felt like I had lost everything. My world had come crashing down around me, and for a while, I thought I would never be able to rebuild it. I had no home, no one to turn to, and my own parents had cast me aside without a second thought. But as I sat there in my grandmother's living room that night, staring at the familiar walls, something inside me shifted. I realized that the one thing I still had was my strength. I had made it this far, and I was not going to let Ethan or my parents continue to control my life. I would not let them win. It was time to fight back. The first step was taking control of my own life. I needed to regain my sense of self, something that had been stripped from me over the years of manipulation, false accusations, and emotional abuse. But I also needed something more. Something that would put Ethan and my parents in their place once and for all. I had no money, no career, and no support from the people who should have had my back. But I did have one thing: my words. I was always the quiet one, the one who kept to myself, but I knew I could write. I had always loved writing, but I had never thought of it as something that could become my path to success. That night, I sat down with a notebook and began to write. I started with the basics: stories from my childhood, my experiences with Ethan, and the things my parents had done to me. I poured everything into that notebook, every emotion, every word that had been suppressed for so long. The next morning, I took the first step. I signed up for a few freelance writing websites. I did not expect much, but I figured it was a start. I worked tirelessly, writing blog posts, articles, and product descriptions for clients. I barely made enough to cover my expenses, but it was something. I was building my own path, one word at a time. As I continued to work on my writing, I started to think about the bigger picture. I wanted to expose Ethan for what he had done. I wanted to show my parents the truth, to make them understand that I had not been the problem. But I also knew that I needed to do it in a way that would have an impact. I could not just confront them. They would never listen. I needed something more strategic. That was when the idea hit me. I knew that Ethan had manipulated not only our family, but also the people around us. He had built an image of himself as the perfect son, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But what if I could expose him in front of everyone? What if I could show everyone the real Ethan, the one who had lied and betrayed me for years? The plan started to take shape in my mind. I would use the same people who had believed Ethan's lies to help me tell the truth. I would write about everything he had done, the false accusations, the way he had manipulated our parents, the rumors he had spread about me. I would share my side of the story, the one he had been working so hard to suppress. But I would not just stop there. I knew that my parents, despite everything, still loved Ethan. They would never admit that they had been wrong, not easily. So, I would need to make them face the truth. I would not beg them for forgiveness. I would not allow them to pretend that everything was fine when they had abandoned me without a second thought. I would make them own up to their actions. The first step in my plan was to gather evidence. I had to prove that Ethan had spread those lies, and that he had been the one who had caused all of this. I spent hours going through old messages, texts, and social media posts, piecing together the lies he had told. I found old conversations where he had admitted to making up stories about me, all to cover his own tracks. Once I had everything I needed, I began to write my story. I would share it with my family, but I would not make it a private affair. I knew that if I wanted to shift the power back to me, I needed to take a bold approach. I would make my story public. I would send it to every relative I could think of, to friends I had lost touch with, to anyone who had ever been a part of my life. And I would include my parents in the story too. They needed to know that I would not let them get away with this. I would not let them pretend they had been the perfect parents when they had abandoned me without a second thought. But I also knew I needed something more than just words. I needed a way to show them that I had moved on, that I had become stronger, and that I had built a life for myself without them. I could not rely on them anymore, but I could prove to them that I was capable of succeeding on my own. That was when I decided to take my freelance writing career to the next level. I would build a portfolio, work with bigger clients, and show my family that I had made something of myself. Over the next few months, I worked nonstop. I took on more projects, wrote more content, and slowly built a reputation for myself. I joined writing communities, reached out to potential clients, and marketed myself in ways I had never thought possible. It was exhausting, but every word I wrote, every contract I signed, made me feel like I was taking back control. And then, one day, it happened. I landed a big project, one with a high-paying client who was looking for a long-term partnership. It was a major breakthrough for me, something I had dreamed about but never thought would happen. I was finally getting the recognition I deserved. But the real turning point came when I received a message from one of my old classmates. She had seen my story online and wanted to reach out. "I had no idea what you went through," she said. "I had always thought the worst of you, but after reading your story, I realized I was wrong." That was when I knew I had won. The power was shifting. Ethan's lies were starting to unravel, and the truth was finally coming to light. It was not just about exposing my brother or my parents. It was about taking control of my own narrative. It was about showing the world that I was not the person they had believed me to be. I was stronger, smarter, and more capable than they had ever given me credit for. The road ahead was not easy, but I was no longer the person I had been. I was someone who had taken control of her life, who had fought back against the people who had wronged her, and who was now standing tall, ready to take on whatever came next. And no one, not even my own family, could ever take that away from me again. It had been months since I began plotting my revenge, and now everything was finally in place. My story was out there, circulating among friends, family, and even some of Ethan's own acquaintances. The lies he had spent years spreading about me were no longer in the shadows. His actions, once hidden behind a veil of manipulation, were being exposed to the very people who had once believed his version of events. I was ready to reveal the truth, and this time, there was no turning back. I had been carefully crafting my message, building up to the perfect moment. I knew I had to hit hard, to make sure Ethan could never manipulate anyone again, but I also knew I needed to remain composed. I had spent too many years being silenced, and now I was speaking out with the strength I had found within myself. No more hiding. No more pretending I was the one at fault. It was time for the truth to take center stage. The day came when I sent my final piece of the puzzle to the people who mattered most. My parents, my relatives, everyone who had turned their back on me or chosen to believe the lies about me. I sent them an email, a letter that detailed everything Ethan had done. I included screenshots of the conversations where he admitted to his lies, the messages he had sent about me, and the years of emotional and mental manipulation he had carried out. I also attached the text he had sent me, the one where he openly admitted to being the mastermind behind the rumors that had destroyed my life. But I did not stop there. I also sent the email to Ethan himself. When he read it, I knew he would be furious. I knew he would try to cover up his tracks. But this time, there was no escaping it. The damage had already been done. The truth was now out in the open, and there was no way for him to twist it back in his favor. I waited anxiously as the hours passed. I could feel my pulse quicken as the first few replies started to come in. My aunt, my cousins, even some of my old friends, people who had once believed the worst about me, were all responding with shock and apologies. They could not believe what they were reading. Then my parents' response came. It was a short email, and my heart sank as I opened it. My father's words were cold, as expected. We had no idea. We believed him. We are sorry, but this cannot be undone. My mother's reply was even worse. You should have told us sooner. We cannot change the past. We made our choice. This is not your fault, but it is too late to fix what has been broken. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. My parents, the people who had rejected me, who had abandoned me for their perfect son, were now apologizing because they had no choice. They could not undo the damage they had done, and that, in itself, was the ultimate form of betrayal. But as I read their emails, something shifted inside me. I realized that they were not the ones I needed to seek approval from anymore. I had spent so many years trying to gain their love, their approval. I had wanted to be the child they could be proud of, but I no longer needed their validation. The truth had been laid bare, and I had proven that I was better than they ever thought I could be. And then came Ethan's message. He had not expected me to take this route. He had thought I would just move on, or worse, beg him for forgiveness. But that was not going to happen. I had already seen the kind of person he was, and I had no intentions of letting him get away with it. His text was full of venom and rage. "You really think you've won, don't you?" it read. "You're just a bitter, jealous little girl who couldn't handle the fact that I was better than you. You've destroyed everything. No one will believe you now. You're just making things worse for yourself. I'm not scared of you." I could feel the heat of anger rise inside me as I read his words. But I was calm. I had prepared for this. I knew how to handle it. I responded with a message that I knew would hit him where it hurt. "You had your chance to make things right. You had your chance to tell the truth. But instead, you chose to destroy me. You wanted to break me. But all you did was make me stronger. I hope you enjoy the fallout from this. You will never have the same power over me again." It felt good. It felt freeing. And it was the last message I would ever send him. But the ultimate blow was yet to come. I had contacted a lawyer about the situation, about the emotional abuse I had suffered, and the long-term consequences of Ethan's actions. I wanted to ensure that he could not continue to manipulate me or anyone else. My lawyer had helped me craft a letter, a cease and desist notice, that I sent to Ethan. It demanded that he stop spreading lies about me, cease all communication with me and my family, and take accountability for his actions. I made it clear that if he did not comply, I would take legal action. The letter was a final declaration of war. It was my way of saying, "This ends now." When Ethan received the letter, I knew he would be furious. I knew he would try to deny everything, try to spin his own narrative. But the law was on my side. The evidence was irrefutable, and that was the moment I knew I had won. Ethan's power had been stripped away. The truth had been exposed, and there was no going back for him. A few days later, I received an apology from my grandmother. She had seen the story, and though she had not known the full extent of what had happened, she believed me. She apologized for not standing by me sooner. Her words were heartfelt, and they gave me the closure I needed. I had lost my parents, but at least I had one person who had always believed in me. As for Ethan, he could no longer hide behind his lies. His reputation, once untouchable, had been shattered. People began to see him for what he truly was, a coward and a liar. The day I walked into the family reunion months later, it was different. People looked at me differently. The whispers that once followed me now seemed to fade away. There was no longer any doubt. The truth had triumphed. I walked past my parents, who could not even look me in the eye. They were ashamed of what they had done, ashamed of how they had treated me. I had no desire to speak to them, no need to hear their empty apologies. But I had one final moment with my brother. He was standing off to the side, eyes narrowed, trying to hide the anger on his face. As I passed him, I stopped, looked him square in the eye, and said, "You had your chance. Now, I am done with you." And with that, I walked away, finally free. The weeks that followed my decision to expose the truth felt like a whirlwind. At first, I was still processing everything that had happened. The emotional abuse, the betrayal, and the sheer weight of it all. But as the days passed, I began to feel something I had not felt in years. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I was no longer weighed down by the lies that had been told about me, nor by the manipulation that had once controlled me. When I walked away from my parents, I thought I would be devastated. After all, they were my family, the people I had spent my entire life trying to please. But in the end, their absence felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I did not need their approval to succeed. I did not need their love to be happy. Realize that despite everything they had done, I had built my own life. I had become stronger, more independent, and more resilient than I ever thought possible. And that was something no one could take away from me. My writing career, which had started as a side hustle, had grown exponentially. I had built a solid portfolio of work, landing bigger clients and gaining the respect of those in the industry. Every project I completed brought me closer to my ultimate goal, freedom. I was no longer working for someone else's approval. I was working for myself. I could finally call the shots, choose my own path, and decide my own future. And it felt incredible. What was even more fulfilling was the way I had been able to use my story to help others. I had received countless messages from people who had been in similar situations, people who had felt abandoned, manipulated, or betrayed by those they loved. Some had even experienced the same toxic dynamics in their own families. Reading those messages, knowing that my story had made a difference in their lives, was the validation I had been seeking all along. For the first time, I felt like I was truly making an impact. I wasn't just writing to survive. I was writing to empower others. I had learned that my voice mattered. I had learned that my story was powerful, and by sharing it, I could help others reclaim their lives too. As for Ethan, the man who had once been my twin brother, the one who had tormented me for so long, his downfall was nothing short of devastating. The moment my story went public, everything he had worked so hard to conceal came crashing down. The people who had once adored him began to see him for what he really was: a liar, a manipulator, and a coward. His friends turned their backs on him. His reputation, which had been built on lies and deceit, crumbled before his eyes. The school, which had once believed his fabricated stories about me, started to question his character. His popularity, once effortless, evaporated. He had no one left. His own friends no longer trusted him, and his standing in the community diminished to nothing. But the most satisfying part of all was seeing my parents finally realize what they had done. I could see it in their eyes, the regret, the shame. They had made their choice years ago, and now they were living with the consequences. I never expected them to come crawling back, but it was clear that they knew they had failed me. The apology they gave me, however, was hollow. They were sorry for how they had treated me, but they would never admit how wrong they had been. It was too late for that. I had already moved on. I did not need their approval anymore. I had my own life, my own success, and my own happiness. The people who mattered now were the ones who had supported me throughout the journey. And that was enough. In the months that followed, I continued to flourish. I was traveling the world as a digital nomad, writing for clients from all over the globe. My grandmother, the one person who had always believed in me, was by my side every step of the way. We spent our weekends together, enjoying each other's company, sharing stories, and making memories that I would cherish forever. I had made peace with my past. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it no longer controlled me. I had taken back my life, my future, and my happiness. I had won. And Ethan, he was a shadow of the person he once was. He had no friends, no support, and no respect. He had destroyed his own life with his lies, and there was no coming back from that. As for me, I was living proof that no matter how dark things get, No matter how deeply you feel the weight of betrayal, you have the power to rise above it. You have the strength to fight back, to stand tall, and to reclaim your life. Reflection. Looking back on everything, I realized that the most important lesson I learned was this: never let anyone define you. No matter how many people try to tear you down, how many lies are told about you, or how much you feel alone in the world, your truth will always stand strong in the end. The journey to reclaim my life was not easy. It was filled with pain, betrayal, and heartbreak. But it was also filled with growth, strength, and triumph. And now, as I stand here, looking back on everything I have overcome, I am proud of the person I have become. I did not let anyone's lies dictate my future. I did not let their manipulation control me. I took control of my own destiny, and that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all.